The bottom floors are all flooded, the walls are peeling, the structure doesn't seem too sound, and there's rust, random papers, books, and all kinds of debris lying everywhere.
Somebody's in there.
At first, when the order to search Rick Harrison's house was issued, everyone assumed it was just a routine financial investigation. However, when FBI agents descended into the basement of the mansion, no one could have imagined they were unknowingly uncovering a real-life gateway to hell. Behind a thick wall of freshly sealed bricks, they discovered a human body. But that was just the beginning. Beneath those layers of bricks, the FBI continued to uncover multiple bodies scattered throughout the basement, with the overwhelming stench of decay so intense that many personnel had to hold their breath just to carry on. It wasn't until the identification process began that the horrifying truth gradually came to light. The incident quickly became a sensational headline across international media outlets, not only because of its unprecedented level of horror, but also due to the fact that the central figure was a well-known celebrity. Someone once praised as a symbol of perseverance and business acumen. What could have led a beloved public figure to become the center of one of the most shocking criminal cases in American history? The answer is far from simple, because behind it all lies a complex underground network and a dark past that Rick Harrison had skillfully kept hidden for years beneath a flawless facade. 1. The FBI's initial investigation. The story didn't begin with gunfire or a shocking accusation. It all started with a suspicious figure on a financial balance sheet. In early 2022, during a random audit jointly conducted by the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and the FBI, the gold and silver pawn shop, owned by Rick Harrison, was flagged as a business showing signs of dishonest tax reporting. Although the discrepancies were minor, they recurred consistently and primarily involved cash transactions and goods with unclear origins, which quickly caught the attention of the authorities. At first, investigators assumed it was just another case of routine tax evasion, similar to hundreds of other files involving mid-sized businesses in Nevada, possibly skirting the law. But Rick Harrison wasn't just any business owner. He was a well-known figure in the American antiquities trade, a national television personality with millions of fans. His pawn shop, which had appeared countless times on television, was famous for dealing in rare, unusual items, often negotiated on the spot. That made the lack of financial transparency even more troubling. If someone widely seen as a symbol of honest business practices was hiding cards, it might point to something far more serious behind the scenes. A specialized FBI task force based in Las Vegas was assigned to closely monitor the shop's financial activity. Before long, they uncovered a string of suspicious transactions. Numerous cash payments ranging from $15,000 to $50,000 showed up repeatedly with no clear invoices. High-value items like ancient Buddha statues, 13th century Chinese porcelain, and Egyptian antiquities were being purchased without verifiable provenance. And some of these items even matched entries on stolen artifact lists from museums across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. What pushed Rick Harrison's case into the high-risk category was how often his name appeared in Interpol's internal alert system. 3 artifacts once discovered at his shop, before being auctioned in Los Angeles, had been listed among items stolen during armed raids in Syria and Jordan. According to the FBI's internal report, these artifacts had vanished from conflict zones only a few months before mysteriously turning up in Las Vegas. Around the same time, investigators also began analyzing data from banks affiliated with Rick Harrison's businesses. There, they uncovered a complex money movement pattern. Profits from antiquities sales were being funneled through multiple layers of accounts, most registered under shell companies in Belize, Cyprus, and the British Virgin Islands, before returning to the United States disguised as personal investment capital. In less than 2 years, the estimated total of this repatriated money had exceeded $4.7 million. This led the FBI to stop viewing the case as a simple act of isolated financial fraud. Instead, their suspicions increasingly pointed toward the possibility of a large-scale money laundering operation. with Rick Harrison positioned at the center of the network. The agency began expanding its investigation, shifting its focus to the backgrounds of customers who frequently conducted transactions at the gold and silver pawn shop. From there, they uncovered a discovery that would steer the entire case in a completely different direction. At least 5 individuals who had engaged in high-value transactions directly with Rick had mysteriously disappeared without a trace between 2017 and 2021. Remarkably, none of these cases had ever been resolved, and more strikingly, none of these individuals were ever mentioned by Rick in any official reports. Although there was no concrete evidence at the time directly tying Rick Harrison to any serious criminal activity, the number of uncanny coincidences compelled the FBI to place him under covert surveillance. For the next 6 months, a team of agents was assigned to closely monitor Rick, with their primary focus being his private residence, a mansion spanning more than 1,000 square meters, located on the western edge of Las Vegas, and secured by an advanced, state-of-the-art security system. Suspicions continued to grow as the surveillance team observed a series of unusual deliveries being made to the mansion during nighttime hours. Large wooden crates with no labels, transported by trucks that were not registered for commercial use. Several of the delivery personnel had questionable backgrounds and had previously been investigated for involvement in black market antiquities trafficking. In addition, the mansion's premises were found to contain at least 3 heavily reinforced areas that did not appear in the original construction plans, a detail that could only be explained by an intent to conceal or avoid detection. The FBI swiftly applied for a search warrant. On April 17, 2024, Rick Harrison's mansion was officially raided. What investigators discovered inside not only stunned law enforcement but sent shockwaves across the entire country. No one could have anticipated that a few minor discrepancies in financial reports would unravel into a horrifying case of serial murder, accompanied by a cascade of severe charges, including money laundering, antiquities smuggling, and operating an international crime syndicate. But what shocked the public most was the revelation of Rick Harrison's true persona. A completely different individual hiding beneath the carefully crafted image of a friendly pawnshop owner he had maintained for over a decade. On one side was the lovable television figure known for his warm smile and extensive knowledge, and on the other was a man now at the very center of the most disturbing murder case ever seen in the history of American reality television. 2. Rick's mansion, the center of the mystery. Nestled in the affluent western suburbs of Las Vegas, Rick Harrison's mansion was once hailed by lifestyle magazines as a paradise for history enthusiasts. From the outside, the property appeared entirely unremarkable. Sprawling over 2 acres, fortified with towering iron gates, discreetly enveloped by lush greenery, featuring a sizable swimming pool at the rear, and a garage accommodating 4 luxury vehicles. Every aspect exuded the sophistication of a wealthy television personality, subtle, refined, yet undeniably enviable. However, beneath this glamorous facade lay what FBI agents would later describe as a deliberately designed nightmare. Armed with a search warrant and supported by a forensic team, the FBI conducted a raid on the mansion in the early hours of April 17, 2024. Their initial objective was to uncover documents, financial records, and potentially smuggled artifacts. Yet, none were prepared for the revelations awaiting them behind the heavy doors. Upon entry, investigators immediately sensed an unsettling atmosphere. Despite the luxurious and meticulously arranged interior, the space emanated an unusual coldness, not in temperature but in a lifeless, monotonous manner, as if no one genuinely inhabited the residence. Several rooms were shrouded with heavy curtains, showing no signs of use, and certain areas bore indications of being sealed off or inexplicably locked from within. On the ground floor, authorities discovered a series of large wooden crates meticulously concealed within the wine cellar, a section accessible solely to the homeowner. Contrary to expectations, these crates did not contain wine, but housed extremely valuable antiquities, wrapped in velvet cloth emblazoned with logos from various museums across the Middle East, Asia, and North Africa. The majority lacked legitimate ownership documentation, and many items matched those listed as stolen in armed heists occurring between 2016 and 2022. The most shocking discovery emerged when an agent inadvertently uncovered a hidden room behind a false wall in Rick's personal library. This small, entirely enclosed chamber lacked windows and contained a decomposing corpse. The body, wrapped in tarpaulin and devoid of identification, was accompanied by an antique watch, later confirmed to belong to a collector who had vanished in 2019. This finding triggered the FBI's Special Response Protocol. The entire mansion was immediately sealed off, forensic teams were deployed extensively, and the search scope was broadened. Within the subsequent 48 hours, a total of 24 additional bodies were uncovered. Some were located in the basement cellar, others hidden beneath hollow sections of flooring. A few were buried in areas absent from the mansion's original architectural plans, indicating unauthorized constructions by Rick Harrison intended for concealing corpses. All victims were in advanced stages of decomposition, with some believed to have been there for over 5 years. According to forensic assessments, the majority of victims were males aged between 30 and 50. Some were listed as missing persons from neighboring states, while others could not be immediately identified due to the absence of fingerprints or soft tissue. Notably, many shared a suspicious commonality. They had connections to the gold and silver pawn shop, or had engaged in dealings with Rick Harrison's associates involving antiquities suspected of being illicit. At the scene of the incident, investigators also discovered hundreds of handwritten pages, believed to be Rick's personal journal. In these notes, he meticulously detailed his thoughts, emotions, and judgments about each person he had interacted with in major business deals. Some of the entries were deeply chilling. He knows too much. Cannot be trusted. Must be handled soon. High risk, but the reward is tempting enough to take the chance. These disturbing words led the authorities to a deeply alarming conclusion. Rick Harrison might not just be a criminal businessman, he may very well have become a serial killer, acting with intent, careful planning, and a calculated strategy. Another haunting detail was the so-called secret gallery, a soundproofed space hidden beneath the basement, fully isolated from the main electrical system and accessible only through biometric fingerprint identification. Inside, investigators found an array of disturbing items: photographs of victims, their personal belongings, several identification cards, and even objects that appeared to be trophies kept after the victims' disappearances. While some have called it a twisted shrine, for FBI agents, it was unmistakable evidence of a recurring psychological pattern, a serial killer who kept mementos to assert dominance and preserve the memory of each victim. When Rick Harrison was taken into custody, he showed no signs of fear or confusion. One agent described him as being eerily calm. He did not resist, nor did he offer any explanation. He simply stood silently, watching as officers placed seal tags across the house that had once symbolized his spectacular success. This behavior only reinforced suspicions that Rick hadn't acted unconsciously. He was fully aware of what he had done and had deliberately kept it hidden for years, without anyone, family or closest associates, ever suspecting a thing. The case quickly sent shockwaves across the nation. The idea that a famous television personality, trusted and adored by millions, could have led a double life for over a decade left the public deeply shaken. Reporters and media outlets swarmed to Las Vegas, flooding the entrance of the mansion with cameras and journalists. What was once a luxurious retreat had now turned into the crime scene of one of the most horrifying criminal cases in reality television history. Inside the mansion, each door that was opened revealed another layer of secrets, and the deeper they went, the clearer it became. Rick Harrison had turned his own home into a vault of deadly secrets, a place that hid the truth behind a so-called empire built not only on knowledge and wealth, but also on blood and absolute silence. What truly sent chills down everyone's spine wasn't just the shocking number of 25 victims. It was the fact that Rick had lived among their corpses for years, as if they didn't exist. As if death itself had become just another routine part of the long, manipulative negotiations in the deceptive world of antiquities. And the ultimate question still lingers, like a knife embedded in the collective psyche. How could one man maintain two parallel lives, one dazzling in the spotlight of television, the other cold and murderous in the shadows, without being discovered for nearly a decade? 3. The revelation of the underground criminal network. After the search of Rick Harrison's mansion concluded, investigators quickly realized that what they had just uncovered was merely the visible tip of an enormous iceberg, and the submerged portion might be far deeper and more dangerous than they had initially imagined. The discovery of multiple bodies couldn't possibly be explained by a sudden outburst or a moment of irrational rage. Everything was too neat, too silent, and too perfectly staged to be a random coincidence. This led the FBI to entertain a chilling hypothesis that demanded thorough investigation. Rick Harrison wasn't just a lone killer. He was a vital link in a broader organization, an international criminal network, where antiquities served as an elaborate front, and human lives were the price paid to protect the entire operation. Through the extraction of electronic data from the mansion, including hard drives, personal servers, and encrypted phones, investigators uncovered a fully closed communication system, operating through anonymous platforms like EncroChat and Sky ECC. Working in tandem, the FBI and Europol decrypted the data and retrieved hundreds of messages sent directly from Rick's devices. Messages that left little room for misinterpretation. Delivery locations, artifact codes, pricing symbols, and cryptic payment keywords such as gold, black grain, or blood numbers, jargon commonly used in illicit antiquities trade. Among those who had communicated with Rick, at least 12 individuals were confirmed to have prior convictions related to antiquities smuggling and were affiliated with organized crime syndicates in Turkey, Iraq, Egypt, and the Balkan region. Notably, 2 names emerged under the aliases Farouk and S-Man, both of whom currently appear on Interpol's Red Notice list. According to an internal report from 2020, these 2 suspects were believed to be the masterminds behind the theft of nearly 300 artifacts from Syria's National Museum during the Civil War. Rick Harrison's direct contact with them, his role in negotiating prices, and his coordination of delivery timelines only reinforced his central position within this network.
Even more alarming was the FBI's finding that Rick wasn't simply hunting rare antiquities. He was directly involved in the verification of goods, assessing their legal standing, and devising methods to legitimize the items before introducing them to the consumer market. In other words, he wasn't just a financial facilitator. He also acted as a consultant and expert, making him an indispensable asset to the entire operational chain of the network.
According to the FBI's analysis, the smuggling network operated in a triangular structure. The supply originated from conflict zones in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Transit hubs were mainly based in Europe, particularly France, Switzerland, and Belgium. And the final destinations were major consumer markets such as the United States and China. Rick served as the U.S. endpoint, using the gold and silver pawn shop as a laundering front, importing antiquities into the country, disguising them as legitimate collectibles, then selling them via private auctions or passing them to wealthy collectors of ancient artifacts. Based on the investigation records, between 2016 and 2023, Rick Harrison was estimated to have played a role in legalizing at least 147 valuable antiquities, with a total transaction value exceeding 19 million USD. These items included part of a 6th century Buddha statue stolen from northern India, an ancient stone lion sculpture from Armenia, 2 bronze wine vessels dating back to China's Zhou dynasty, and most notably, an almost complete replica of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, allegedly stolen from Luxor in 2011. Under international law, these artifacts are strictly prohibited from being sold or circulated. Yet, due to his reputation and deep knowledge of the field, Rick was able to easily bypass verification systems. This criminal network operated in complete secrecy. All transactions were facilitated through intermediaries, funds were funneled through offshore companies based in the Caribbean, and every artifact was accompanied by forged documentation produced by counterfeit document operations in Romania or Hong Kong. Those who dared to question or oppose Rick Harrison gradually disappeared, and now their bodies have been discovered within the very mansion built from that blood-stained fortune. A striking example is the disappearance of Javier Montes, a Spanish antiquities collector who went missing in Las Vegas in 2020 after meeting with Rick. According to his wife's testimony, Javier had shown signs of unease after discovering that some of the artifacts Rick offered him raised concerns about their provenance. Not long afterward, he vanished without leaving any trace. Later, his remains were identified as one of the 25 victims found at Rick's mansion, confirmed through DNA analysis from dental records. Another case involves Valerie Chen, a Canadian freelance journalist who had published an article criticizing how pawn shops in the US were able to circumvent the law to distribute banned cultural artifacts. Valerie had tried to reach out to Rick for an interview. 4 months later, she was reported missing in Nevada. The FBI later confirmed that the body of a woman found in the basement of Rick's mansion matched her DNA. Cases like these paint a far more brutal and expansive picture. Rick was not merely eliminating business rivals. He was also willing to silence anyone who questioned the system he represented. In a journal recovered by investigators, Rick once wrote, "If you want to keep the gold, you have to bury the digger deep." On another front, the FBI investigation also revealed that Rick had not acted alone. He had associates, people who either knew or, at the very least, had some idea of what was going on. Several notable figures in the antiquities community were summoned for questioning, including a prominent advisor from a major New York museum and a former auctioneer who had worked at Sotheby's. They are believed to have played a role in legitimizing the origins of questionable artifacts. Although no one has been formally charged yet, the list of those implicated continues to grow. The question is, how did Rick Harrison manage to run such a sophisticated network for nearly a decade without detection? Part of the answer lies in the personal image he cultivated. As a familiar face on television, Rick naturally benefited from a kind of media shield. He appeared on screen as a man passionate about history, curious, composed, and well-mannered. He regularly hosted talks, took part in exhibitions, and maintained strong relationships with respected historical organizations. This made any suspicion toward him easy to dismiss through reverse skepticism. Rick Harrison involved in smuggling? That's hard to believe. The other part lies in how the antiquities trade itself operates. In this world, the line between legal and illegal is incredibly thin. Few items can be definitively traced to a verifiable origin, and authentication often relies more on individual reputation than on objective documentation. In this case, Rick was not only following the rules, he was also redefining them. The exposure of this network transformed Rick Harrison's case into more than just a personal scandal. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in the global fight against cultural heritage trafficking, where the culprits no longer wear masks and hide in the shadows, but don tailored suits, stand on television stages, and speak eloquently about historical value. And when the FBI released its initial evidence, what shocked the American public was not only the discovery of 25 bodies, but a far bigger question. How many people, how many artifacts, how many museums are unknowingly or knowingly entangled in a network where Rick Harrison is merely the tip of the iceberg? 4. The double life of Rick Harrison. On television, Rick Harrison is a beloved figure to a wide audience. He appears as a wise and composed businessman, someone who navigates situations with calmness and broad knowledge. From ancient Roman coins to Civil War-era firearms, Rick consistently presents himself as a relatable scholar, someone who not only offers a price, but also shares fascinating historical stories connected to each item. This unique approach makes him stand out significantly from other reality TV stars. Viewers don't just turn to him for entertainment, but also to gain something of value. However, when the FBI raided Rick's mansion and exposed what had been hidden within, many were left shocked, asking themselves how a person could live with such contrasting duality for over a decade. On one hand, the dignified public persona, and on the other, a cold-blooded predator. The answer isn't as simple as cunning or the ability to play a role. The core lies in something much deeper. Rick Harrison built his entire life as a system of control, one where everything around him, including how others perceived him, remained within his grasp. It wasn't merely about concealing things, it was a deliberate process of self-division, meticulously maintained through the smallest details of everyday life. The documents discovered in his home, especially the diary pages carefully stored in his desk drawer, revealed a completely different Rick Harrison than the one known to the public. In them, he wrote about the burden of maintaining a media persona, about the suffocation of being surrounded by false praise, and most strikingly, about creating a private space where I can do whatever I want without needing anyone's permission. One particular note stood out. Everyone has a secret museum. Some keep memories, others hide failures. I keep corpses, but at least they never lie. This wasn't exactly a confession. It was a cold, clear-headed declaration. Rick knew exactly who he was. He didn't try to deny the darkness within him. He simply learned how to conceal it in the last place anyone would think to look, directly beneath the bright lights of the stage. Criminologists who examined the case files all reached the same conclusion. Rick Harrison was not an impulsive or reckless criminal. On the contrary, he exhibited the defining traits of an organized killer, a type of criminal marked by intelligence, calculated planning, and the ability to sustain a flawless public image that served as an impeccable disguise. That explains how he managed to continue living, working, and regularly appearing on television, while just a few steps below his feet lay the bodies of those who had dared to defy or threaten the network he commanded. One of the key traits of this kind of offender is an obsession with absolute power, not just in action, but in ideology. Rick didn't simply want to profit from dealing in antiquities. He wanted full control over the entire operational chain, from sourcing and pricing to shaping the reputation of the owner. If an item was considered priceless, then Rick alone had the authority to determine exactly how much it was worth. This mindset was especially evident in how he handled threats. Victims weren't eliminated due to personal grudges. They were removed because they disrupted the seamless operation of the machine Rick had so painstakingly built. To him, they were technical errors, and he corrected them with finality. No drama, no emotion. As if removing a faulty component from an assembly line, clean, efficient, and without hesitation. During the investigation, experts discovered that Rick had kept a large number of his victims' personal belongings, ranging from wristwatches and necklaces to old plane tickets, hotel receipts, and even family photos. All of these items were meticulously arranged in a glass cabinet located in a hidden room secured by a fingerprint lock system, accessible only by Rick himself. The FBI referred to it as a trophy vault of crime. To Rick, however, as noted on a handwritten message he left behind, it was something far more personal. This is the real ledger, not where I count money, but where I count those unworthy of life. It was this act of keeping such items, disturbing as it may be, that revealed something deeper. Rick didn't kill simply to eliminate. He killed to remember. Just as he cherished an ancient Roman coin or a flintlock pistol from the 18th century, Rick extended the same twisted reverence to his achievements in the criminal underworld. Only this time, what he collected were human lives. The split between the Rick on television and the Rick in the shadows didn't originate from a traumatic childhood or some personal tragedy. According to a psychological assessment commissioned by the FBI, Rick had a completely normal upbringing. He was not abused, and there was no history of mental illness. Yet, from an early age, he exhibited traits of someone obsessed with superiority. He wanted to win, loved proving others wrong, and had a deep aversion to being doubted. Some of his high school teachers described him as a quiet, socially distant kid who always had to be the one with the right answer. When fame came to Rick, he didn't view it as a shock, it was a tool. Throughout the 10-year run of Pawn Stars, he maintained almost flawless control. He managed the content with precision, only appeared before the public when fully prepared, and kept his distance from unauthorized media outlets. This level of control revealed how well he understood the power of image, and how he used it as a shield against suspicion. That's why, when the full truth was exposed, the public was left stunned.
Rick didn't come off as withdrawn or mentally unstable. He embodied trustworthiness. And when people had to confront the fact that someone so emblematic of reliability could also be a cold-blooded killer, their belief in the safety and order of society was shaken to its core. Most of Rick's loyal audience consisted of America's middle class, people who placed their faith in personal effort and the dream of building a better life with their own two hands. They admired Rick because he symbolized that dream. So when the truth surfaced, it didn't just cause them pain. It left them feeling deeply betrayed, as if Rick hadn't just killed people, but had also destroyed the trust they had invested in the media and in the idea of the self-made successful man. This double life, this two-faced reality, wasn't limited to Rick as an individual. It reflected the very nature of reality television itself, a world where everything can be staged, polished, and manipulated to appear more real than real. Rick understood this perfectly. He exploited it to craft a version of Rick Harrison so polished, even he eventually believed in the character he created. But the other side, the side the FBI uncovered in that mansion, is where the real Rick was hiding. Not a man who appraised antiques, but someone who appraised human worth. And the price he assigned, as shown by the 25 bodies found in his home, was sometimes life itself. 5. Media impact and public reaction. When the FBI officially announced that they had discovered 25 bodies in Rick Harrison's mansion, the entire United States was left in shock. However, what made the public even more stunned was not just the number of victims or the nature of the crime, but the name associated with the case. A famous individual who had appeared regularly on TV screens for over a decade, now exposed as one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of reality television. The initial public reaction was directed towards Rick's family, particularly Corey Big Hoss Harrison, his son and longtime co-star on Pawn Stars. Corey was not only his biological heir, but was also seen as the one who would follow in Rick's television career. When his father was suddenly accused of being a serial killer, running an international smuggling network of antiquities, and leading a double life within their family mansion, Corey became the target of public suspicion, criticism, and personal attacks. Immediately, the media raised the question, did Corey know anything? In episodes of Pawn Stars, Corey was portrayed as a funny, sometimes naive individual, but always standing by his father in all major deals. With a show that had been on air for over a decade and aired more than 500 episodes, many found it hard to believe that Corey hadn't noticed anything unusual about his co-worker father. Public opinion split into two distinct sides. One side sympathized, seeing Corey as a victim, while the other side was more skeptical, suspecting that he might have known but stayed silent for personal gain. In his only statement to the media after the incident, Corey briefly said, "I didn't know. If I had known, I wouldn't be here today. I am his son, not an accomplice." However, that explanation was not enough to calm the waves of doubt. Some internet users dug up old interviews, cited images from the show, and tried to find any signs of change in Rick's behavior that Corey might have noticed. While no one could be certain of the answer, it was clear that Corey's image, once seen as the faithful heir, was now overshadowed by suspicion. As for the Pawn Stars production team, the shock came not only from the crime itself, but from the fact that they had been living, working, and filming with a murderer for over 10 years without knowing. An anonymous production assistant shared with The Hollywood Reporter that Rick was always the one in control of every backstage operation, from editing the scripts to scheduling filming. He was never overly friendly, but always punctual, professional, and never lost his temper. "It's that calmness that is truly terrifying when you look back," the assistant said. When the story broke, History Channel had no choice but to completely cancel the show, despite Pawn Stars being one of the longest-running and most successful programs on the network.
All advertising contracts, international licensing deals, and store tour bookings were canceled within less than 10 days. Many of the behind-the-scenes crew members, who had been with the show since its early days, were immediately laid off. "I feel like I helped create a media monster," one crew member shared. The real gold and silver pawn shop, which had once been a popular tourist destination in Las Vegas, was also forced to close indefinitely. The building was sealed off for investigative purposes, and tourists were too afraid to come near. Those who had previously visited just to buy small items and perhaps meet Rick Harrison in person now only wanted to forget their memories of the place. Rick's family was nearly torn apart. His wife, who had made a few appearances in backstage scenes, no longer appeared in public and was rumored to have left Nevada. His other children also remained completely silent. According to some sources, they were cooperating with investigators to clarify which of the family's assets had been acquired through illegal activities, a necessary step to avoid being implicated in the criminal case. 6. The trial and sentencing. At the end of March 2025, Rick Harrison was officially charged with 29 offenses, including first-degree murder, running an organized criminal network, trafficking in illegal antiques, money laundering, and obstructing justice. The investigation proceeded swiftly after nearly 3 months of work, involving more than 70 federal agents and criminal experts. By this time, all doubts had been erased. Rick Harrison was the mastermind behind a series of organized murders carried out in his own mansion, where the FBI discovered 25 bodies hidden away like a macabre museum. The first trial began on September 18, 2024, at the Nevada Federal Court, under strict security and attracting the attention of international media. It was referred to as the trial of the century for reality television. Over 200 reporters were allowed to cover the proceedings live from outside the courthouse. CNN, NBC, and CBS set up daily trial analyses. Never before had a television personality in the U.S. faced such a massive range of serious charges and overwhelming evidence. The chief prosecutor for Nevada, Maria Lopez, opened the trial with a chilling statement. Defendant Rick Harrison is not only a murderer, he has built a network of crime. Every brick in his mansion has been laid with the blood and bones of innocent victims. The prosecution's case rested on 3 main elements. 1. Physical evidence at the crime scene, victim bodies, diaries, personal items. 2. Electronic data, encrypted messages, secret recordings, internal cameras. And 3. Testimonies from witnesses who had either transacted antiques with Rick or had been threatened by him. One piece of evidence revealed during the trial stunned the courtroom into silence. A video showing Rick Harrison in the library of his mansion, standing before one of the display cabinets labeled War Trophies, touching a necklace that was later confirmed to belong to victim Valerie Chen. In the video, Rick said nothing, but the way he looked at the necklace, calm, cold, and devoid of emotion, sent chills down the spine of the jury. The defense team, led by renowned lawyer Peter O'Donnell, adopted a 2-pronged strategy, denying the murder charges and questioning the legitimacy of the investigation. They argued that much of the evidence might have been fabricated, and that Rick Harrison was the victim of a conspiracy to destroy his reputation and assets. O'Donnell repeatedly used the term trial by media to criticize how the public and the press had convicted Rick before he had a chance to defend himself. However, these arguments were not strong enough to counter the evidence. Under pressure from the prosecution and the solid evidence presented, the defense was forced to shift tactics, suggesting that Rick may suffer from multiple personality disorder or had experienced an undiagnosed psychological trauma. However, a series of medical records and psychological evaluations from the FBI disproved this hypothesis. Rick was fully aware of his actions, had no history of mental illness, and was deemed capable of being held criminally responsible. The climax of the trial came when Rick Harrison was allowed to represent himself in court, a surprising decision. For nearly 40 minutes, he made direct eye contact with the jury, speaking in a steady voice, and denied all murder allegations. He said, "I am a businessman. I work in the antique trade. I am not a killer.
Everything you are saying about me, about the mansion, about the bodies, is either made up or a trap. However, these denials only made the jury feel more distant, as his words lacked emotion, lacked conscience, and were completely inconsistent with what had been discovered in his own home. The testimony from the witnesses further tightened the legal noose around Rick. A former employee of his revealed that he had been threatened by Rick for knowing too much. An auction expert also admitted to having been paid to authenticate fake origins for the antiques that Rick brought into the market. Even a journalist who had worked with Valerie Chen confirmed that she was very scared after investigating Rick, just weeks before she disappeared. Finally, after nearly 7 weeks of trial with more than 80 sessions, the 12-member jury reached a unanimous verdict. Rick Harrison was convicted of first-degree murder for the 25 confirmed victims, along with charges of smuggling, money laundering, and operating an international criminal network. With the sentence handed down, Rick received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, along with an order to confiscate all of his assets, including his mansion, the gold and silver pawn shop, international bank accounts, and a collection of antiques worth millions of dollars. When he was escorted out of the courtroom, Rick did not look back. He walked away coldly, as if he had accepted his fate. Not as a betrayed man, but as one who had been exposed. With a face devoid of emotion, he disappeared behind the steel door, carrying with him a past that America wanted to forget, but could not. Rick Harrison, once a familiar face on television, a beloved national TV icon, has now been convicted of mass murder and operating a transnational artifact smuggling ring. His downfall not only marks the collapse of his own life, but also casts a dark shadow over the reality TV industry. This case has far-reaching consequences on public perception of truth and trust. The trial has concluded, and the verdict has been delivered, yet the cracks left by the Rick Harrison case continue to reverberate through American society. On academic forums, media conferences, and in journalism classes, Rick Harrison's name is now cited as a prime example of the two-faced public figure, serving as a lesson in how both the public and the television industry failed to truly recognize a person's character beyond the glossy exterior. What do you think about this case? What is the most chilling part for you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on stories that are even scarier than movies. Because sometimes the truth can be far scarier than we ever imagined. See you in the next video.